There is a conversation you never finished. Maybe it ended too soon. Maybe the other person walked away before you said what you needed to say. Maybe you rehearsed the perfect words for weeks and never got the chance to use them. And yet, somehow, that conversation is still happening inside your head. That is not a coincidence. That is not weakness. That is your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, and the reason why is far stranger than you probably think. In the 1920s, a young psychology student in Berlin noticed something unusual about waiters. She was sitting in a cafe, watching the staff take orders, and she realized that the waiters could remember long, complicated orders with no notes, but the moment the bill was paid and the table cleared, they forgot everything. Ask a waiter what Table 7 ordered 10 minutes after they left, and he had no idea. The student's name was Bluma Zeigarnik, and what she observed in that cafe became one of the most important discoveries in the psychology of memory. She took it back to the laboratory. She gave people a series of simple tasks, puzzles, math problems, small challenges. She let them finish some, others she interrupted halfway through. Then, later, she asked them to recall what they had been working on. The results were striking. People remembered the interrupted tasks almost twice as well as the completed ones. Twice. Not slightly better, not a little more clearly, almost double the recall, simply because the task had never been allowed to finish. This became known as the Zeigarnik effect, and it revealed something fundamental about how your brain actually works. Your brain is not a storage device. It is not quietly filing things away as you complete them. It is a prediction machine, constantly building models, running simulations, looking for patterns, waiting for resolution. And when something does not resolve, your brain does not let it go. It keeps it open. It keeps it running in the background, quietly consuming your attention, waiting for a signal that never comes. Think of it like a song that stops one note before the final chord. You can feel the missing note. You can almost hear it. Your brain reaches for it automatically because your mind was built to seek completion, and when completion does not arrive, it keeps searching. But that's not the strange part. Here's what most people miss about the Zeigarnik effect. Your brain doesn't just remember unfinished things better, it actively prioritizes them. It places them above completed experiences in the mental queue, flags them as unresolved, and returns to them again and again, sometimes for years, in an effort to close the loop. This is why you replay arguments you lost a decade ago. This is why a song stuck in your head is almost always one that got cut off. This is why at 3 in the morning, your brain will not stop rehearsing a conversation that happened on a Tuesday in 2016. It is not torturing you. It is trying to help. Your brain believes, on some deep automatic level, that if it rehearses the scenario enough times, it will eventually find the ending it was looking for. Now here's where things get genuinely strange. Psychologists began to study what happens when the loop never closes, not just interrupted tasks, but life events, relationships that ended without explanation, deaths that came without warning, conflicts that were never resolved. What happens to those? The answer, it turns out, involves a part of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. This is the region responsible for detecting errors, for noticing when something is unresolved, when expectations do not match reality, when the world does not behave the way your brain predicted it would. And when closure is denied, the anterior cingulate cortex does not go quiet. It fires, repeatedly, like an alarm that can't find the off switch. This is not a metaphor. Brain imaging studies have shown that unresolved psychological conflict produces measurable neural activity, sustained, recurring, consuming, in the same way that an unhealed wound keeps signaling to your nervous system that something is wrong. Your mind treats an unanswered question the same way your body treats an open cut. It can't stop attending to it until it closes. But that's not the strange part. Scientists didn't expect what they found next. In a series of studies on grief and loss, researchers discovered something that turned the conventional understanding of closure upside down.
For decades, psychologists believed that closure, getting answers, achieving resolution, finding an explanation was what allowed people to move forward. Without it, healing supposedly stalled. But the data told a different story. People who received clear explanations after a loss did not heal significantly faster than people who received none. In some cases, those with explanations reported feeling worse because the explanation contradicted the story their brain had already been building. Their mental simulation had predicted a different answer, and when the real answer arrived, it didn't fit. What people actually needed, what genuinely accelerated healing, was not information. It was narrative, a story they could tell themselves, a way to organize the experience into something with a beginning, a middle, and an ending, even if the ending was painful, even if the ending was invented. This discovery shifted how psychologists understood closure entirely. Closure is not about finding the truth. It's about giving your brain a final chapter it can accept, a shape to place around something that felt shapeless. Without that shape, your brain keeps writing, keeps revising, keeps generating alternative versions of what could have happened, what should have said, what might have been different, in an endless loop of cognitive revision that psychologists call counterfactual thinking. You know this loop. You have felt it at 2 in the morning. You have felt it in the middle of a conversation about something completely unrelated when your mind suddenly returned, without warning, to the thing that never finished. That is not your mind failing. That is your mind working. It is doing exactly what evolution designed to do: search for resolution, update its model of the world, prepare better responses for next time. The problem is that for certain experiences, certain losses, certain silences, certain conversations that never finished, there is no next time, and your brain was never told that. Here's something worth sitting with. Studies on intrusive thought, the kind of unwanted mental replay that keeps returning despite your attempts to stop it, have found that the harder you try to suppress an unresolved thought, the stronger it comes back. Psychologists call this the rebound effect. The act of suppression itself marks the thought as important. Your brain treats suppression as evidence that something needs attention, and so it attends, again, more loudly. The only thing that quiets an unfinished loop is not force, it is completion, or something close enough to completion that your brain accepts it as an ending. In one experiment, participants who wrote about an unresolved conflict, not to send, not to share, but simply to write, to give the experience a structure on the page, showed measurable reductions in intrusive thinking within days. The act of narrative, of organizing, framing, finding an arc, gave the brain what it was waiting for. Not an answer, not an apology, not a conversation, just an ending it could hold. This is why people write letters they never send, why journals work in ways that conversations sometimes cannot, why people talk to empty chairs or visit graves to say things to people who can no longer hear them. The brain does not need the other person to receive the message. It needs to send it. It needs to feel the loop close, even if the closing is entirely internal, entirely constructed, entirely a story your mind agreed to believe. And perhaps that's the most revealing thing about the human mind. It does not need the world to be resolved. It needs to feel resolved. It needs narrative. It needs shape. It needs the sense, even if it is only a sense, that something is finished. The tasks you never completed, the conversations you never had, the questions nobody answered, the losses that arrived without explanation, they are still running somewhere inside you, not because your brain is broken, but because it is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is waiting for the ending. And sometimes, the only way to give it one is to write the ending yourself. There is a conversation you never finished. Maybe you now understand why it is still happening.